Welcome to this presentation about the 2025 BRICS Summit that took place in Brazil on the 6th to 7th of July. And today we're going to be unpacking the outcomes and remembering that BRICS is more than just a nifty acronym to remember. It's a bloc that represents an alternative vision for global governance. And what we've got to continually do is to explore its growing membership, its ambitions, and to try to critically analyze its growing influence on the world of geopolitics and whether it offers a viable alternative to the existing world order. So, if we were to take a look at some basic reminders about the BRICS, you can see there's a map there showing the current situation, a growing bloc, absolutely growing bloc. And it was founded in 2006 when it was just the BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. South Africa joined in 2011. And in 2025, this year, there's been a huge expansion. It's included Egypt, Ethiopia, Indonesia, which has got an enormous population, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. So we've got Egypt, economic powerhouse of the Arab world. We've got Ethiopia, one of the fastest growing economies in sub-Saharan Africa, Indonesia with its enormous population, and Iran and the UAE, two petrochemical giants. We've also got some, you can see on the map there, countries invited to join the BRICS, including Turkey, and another petrochemical powerhouse in the form of Saudi Arabia. And you can see some other applicant nations around there. And there are countries that have got partner status, Belarus, Kazakhstan, working alongside the existing members. So it's a growing bloc with members of different depths. And currently, the BRICS represent just over now, with Indonesia being added 50% of the global population. And it accounts for about 45% of global GDP nominal, but at local purchasing power, that stands at over 50%. So this year was the first summit with Indonesia involved, which is the blocks you can see on the map there. It's the first Southeast Asian member. And collectively, these states, these BRIC states, now control significant energy reserves, critical minerals, and now quite a lot of industrial capacity. So it's giving them both economic and political leverage as they attempt to try to reshape some of the world order. So to try to put the conference in some context, the theme this year was strengthening global South cooperation and promoting a more inclusive and sustainable global governance. And I think that theme for this year's conference could almost be a mission statement for the BRICS, if you like. It was in Brazil, so it was chaired by President Da Silva. And for the first time, Xi Jinping was absent, first time when he's been available to go, that he hasn't gone. And Putin participated online because, of course, there's an ICC warrant out for his arrest due to the issues in Ukraine. And there you can start to see maybe some of the issues that the leadership is having in terms of their disparate nature. There are six main agenda items. And what it does is its agenda spans, traditional issues like trade and health, but also you'll notice on that list some cutting edge topics such as AI governance. And this highlights their need to be seen as not a group who are trying to catch up with the West, that they in themselves have got advantages which can lead them to be maybe more ambitious and forward looking. And that's really, really important for the bloc. One of the key things they've looked at is this concept of de-dollarization. So a major point for discussion was that the BRICS leaders are seeing the reliance on the US dollar as a structural disadvantage, especially as we move into an era where there are increasing sanctions being put around the world or even dollar-led financial crises. So there's actually a promotion of local trade currencies instead of the US dollar. And they're seeking to reduce that reliance on Western financial institutions, which are, of course, are dollar-led, going all the way back, as you will remember, to the Bretton Woods agreements at the end of the Second World War. And they're trying to create an alternative financial architecture by strengthening the alternative new development bank. But whether this succeeds, of course, depends on them being able to overcome their own currency instability. So it's okay moving away from the dollar because you feel like it's placing you at a structural disadvantage. But if your own currencies are unstable, then there's no advantage to that. So that will be a challenge moving forward for the BRICS. As we saw, they're trying to be very, very forward-looking in terms of artificial intelligence governance, and this marks an important shift, sorry, because BRICS isn't only contesting economic power, but also what we call this normative power, which is the ability to try to shape rules as we move forward. And they're trying to, rather than just playing catch up like they've done for quite a few decades within existing structures, they're trying to shape the rules of emerging technologies. And by positioning AI as a human rights and developmental issue rather than just a technological issue, the BRICS are highlighting the inequality that exists between those developed and developing nations. And they're arguing that the digital divide could well become a realistic disadvantage for them. So they're trying to get ahead of the curve in terms of, as we've said, shaping the rules for these emerging technologies, trying to get the UN involved to make AI a unique opportunity for everyone to move forward together rather than developing countries catching up with developed countries. In terms of the actual leadership, as we said, Jinping was missing for the first time since 2012. Putin appeared only due to his ICC arrest warrant. And it's worth noting that Lula from Brazil and Modi from India therefore dominated proceedings. And there you've got four powerhouses. So leadership dynamics remain a challenge, with China and Russia being constrained. Brazil and India suddenly move forward and gain promises. But there are lots and lots of internal rivalries that are raising questions. And within the BRICS, just like within some of the Bretton Woods institutions or things like the G7, within that there are internal rivalries and dynamics. And the question is, can a bloc with such diverse political systems, interests, even regional agendas, are they ever going to really be able to act in unison in their best interests? And that tension between the solidarity of this emerging bloc and self-interest is central to analysing whether the BRICS can start to come to preeminence in the coming decades. And you can see there, some examples that are popped on there. China and India in have actual border disputes between the two countries, and there's diversity of member nations. Some of the Gulf states, if Saudi Arabia enter the BRICS alongside Iran, those countries currently don't really have diplomatic relations, and that great swathe across to Southeast Asia and Indonesia through to Sub-Saharan Africa. There's such huge diversity in terms of economy and in terms of leadership structures that cohesion is going to be a great challenge. We do have to always look from an international relations perspective that the BRICS can be argued to embody this shift towards a multipolarity, a world that's no longer dominated by one single superpower, the US or China, for instance, and that by expanding membership and calling for reform of institutions like the UN Security Council, for instance, where they're challenging this notion of who are the permanent nations. BRICS is seeking to kind of institutionalize the influence of the global South, despite those internal divisions and the absence of any kind of enforceable mechanisms that they've got within the group. They're still trying to increase that influence. You can see there when you look at the economic data, they've got fast growing economy, moving ahead of the USA, the EU, very, very slow growth. And like I said, this move towards multipolarity, looking for reform. Yes, they've got the new development bank, but they're also demanding a stronger voice in existing global governance structures, starting also to present themselves as inclusive, sustainable, forward thinking to try and see if they can leverage some soft power. But all the time, trying to manage and trying to move beyond these limitations that we've talked about. So, as always with the BRICS, we come back to this critical analysis. There's a graph showing the decline in terms of nominal GDP share of the G7 from 1990 to 2025 and the rise of the BRICS over the same period. We have to really come to this critical of analysis. Are they currently reshaping the world order? So I think it's fair to say, in some cases, yes, it's started to become a counterweight to some Western-led institutions. It's got huge scale in terms of population, GDP, and those natural resources. It certainly is putting forward a symbolic leadership for the global south and trying to show that it's forward thinking and moving forward on things like AI, climate, and finance. But its power is very much symbolic as it is practical. Without cohesion, then the BRICS risks becoming nothing more really than a forum for declarations on an annual basis rather than any real decisive action. And that's where that analysis comes from. There are geopolitical tensions. They've got limited capacity to implement decisions within that disparate group, and there's still a great dependence on China's economic dominance. And that's also an argument thrown at the G7 that there's a dependence on the US's economic dominance. So we're still in a situation where the jury's out on the exact influence of the BRICS. So overall, BRICS are emerging as a significant actor in global politics. That's undeniable. Its influence lies in how it's amplifying really the voice of the global south and looking to contest the dollar's dominance and try to shape these new debates on technology and climate. But its great challenge is coherence, transforming itself from this loose coalition that it is into a truly coordinated trade bloc. And so for those of us who are trying to understand that, understand the role of BRICS in international politics, it does illustrate how emerging powers are seeking to rewrite the rules of global dominance in the early 21st century. But will it become a real alternative to Western power, or will it just remain an ambitious alliance with too many internal contradictions? Okay, thanks for listening to the update, and I hope it's been helpful and useful in you moving forward and coming up with your own critical evaluation of the role of the BRICS. Thank you.